Welcome to another episode of Two Average Joes. I'm Joseph St. John. I have 30 years of law enforcement experience with the Newport News Police Department for 26 years and finished up my career as the chief of police in Columbus, Mississippi. Had a good opportunity to be involved in all sorts of different investigations, be involved in probably every aspect of police work in one way or the other. And that's really kind of what I want to bring to the table as we get ready to discuss more on the murders, the Michigan murders, and the alleged suspect on all of them, John Norman Collins. So, Mr. Baker, give us a quick update on you.
I am an attorney in Michigan, licensed in 1997. I've been doing primarily criminal defense work and different aspects of litigation and trial work in the wonderful state of Michigan. I was peripherally involved in, after the fact, Gary Leiterman, who was convicted of the third murder through a PR firm that I happen to own a part of as far as public relations, when he was appealing to the Michigan Supreme Court, his decision, or the decision that was convicted him. And I had worked and I have kept up with it. I've spoken with one of the authors of one of the books that were written about it. I have read and followed everything. I was attempting to, with the family, get Mr. Leiterman into the Innocence Project out of Detroit, I believe at University of Michigan, or it was Cooley or both. But anyway, I have involvement in way after the fact this case, and I have a lot of experience and knowledge related to criminal defense work.
So what we want to do is we want to try to bring a unique perspective for our listeners, for our watchers, or however you want to put it, our audience. A lot of things are done and people do good research, but I think a difference between you and me, the difference between you and me and a lot of other people is that we've actually experienced it, that we've actually done it. And in the case of the Michigan murders, probably an underreported case, and we have talked about that on other episodes. But to be honest with everybody, I think having somebody who has some firsthand knowledge, which is Mr. Baker here, that goes a long way to it. And we just want to add our experience. And as we get ready to go to the second victim, I think, we have our little post meetings, and I kind of like to share with the audience what we talk about. And we really want to start focusing on, as much as we are not beating people up for beating people up, say. That's not our job. That's not even your or my style. But you're going to start seeing with this one that there's as many unanswered questions as there is answered questions. And that's really what we're going to focus on today with the situation here. And Joan Schell, I believe I have that name correct. Do I not?
You do?
Okay.
Joan Elsbeth Shell, 20-year-old Eastern Michigan University student. She was an art major, and she was another person looking for a ride. Yes.
And now I'm going to go here because there's a situation, and I guess this comes from all the years that I did safety talks. In my career, that was one of the things I spent a lot of time doing. I was basically doing safety and crime prevention and health protection kind of talk. And I always was careful about this because you do not want to victim blame. And I think that in this case, some people who may be quick to go there may want to do that. I do not like victim blaming. We are not going to victim blame. Look, if everybody that made a mistake suffered for it tremendously, there would be none of us left. And that's really important to me because I think there is that part in our culture where we have to be very careful because we will victim blame. And we're not interested in that. Her situation is she was looking for a ride. As a matter of fact, her and her friend were actually trying to catch the bus late at night. Do I have that right?
You do. She lived on Emmett Street, 70, I believe it was 3 Emmett Street, which is about a block and a half from the field services center where the bus was going to arrive. And she had called, and I believe the last bus was going to be at 10:30. Mm-hmm. And they got there just about at 10:30, her and a girlfriend. Mm-hmm. So I believe you said
the bus passed, and it was full, and it was passing. That's the way I understand.
That's my understanding too.
And she wanted to go see her boyfriend.
Yep.
He was in another town.
Yep. He was in Ann Arbor. He worked at a lab at the University of Michigan, evidently. He was AWOL.
Yeah, he was
AWOL.
So there's a lot going on there, and she wants to see him. Mm-hmm. Now, bus drives by, nobody stops. She's looking for a ride, and a vehicle stops with 3 males, and that's important to remember. There's 3 males.
Yeah. And it was a vehicle. There's a conflict as to whether it was a Ford Fairlane or a Pontiac, I believe. And I've seen 2 different. So the 3 main sources that I'm going off of is the Michigan Murder book, mm-hmm. which was written by Edward Keyes, Greg Fournier's book, which is Terror in Ypsilanti, and then Earl James's Catching Serial Killers, which we'd already said, and the links were in the first one.
They'll be in there this
that we did. So it was definitely a red car with a black top. There was definitely 3 males inside, one of them wearing an EMU T-shirt. Interestingly, or maybe not, a coincidence, John Norman Collins, who was eventually convicted of the 7th and final murder in the string of murders that occurred in this area, he lived right next door in a rooming house across the street from where Miss Shell lived, and she had only lived there for 3 weeks. So
Joan had only lived there 3 weeks.
Yes, Shell had only lived there for 3 weeks, but there's eyewitness testimony. Well, the girlfriend said she got in the car. Right. Okay. Right. There are witnesses that put John Norman Collins with Miss Shell in front or right by those 2 houses where they lived about 3 minutes after she's picked up, which is about how far they were away from it. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of conflicting testimony about what occurred after that. But there's a couple of different witnesses that put Miss Shell in the presence of John Norman Collins at about 11:23 to 11:33-ish.
Are those the pictures that you sent showing their closeness? Or is that for later?
That was, I had done a kind of a.
Yeah, but that goes with this part, right?
Yeah, that does go with this part because it shows how close that field house was to where they lived because it was walking distance.
We want to show everybody that. I want to make sure I get that placed in the right place because we want to have people see how close that was, and that's close. And you're going to have to realize when we do this that there's a very good chance as this bounces around, he knew these people.
Yeah, there's a couple of. He denied knowing this. Okay, but his roommate, who was Arnie Davis, evidently lived across the hall, whose brother or cousin had a car that was red with a black top. Mm-hmm. This is where it goes conflicting because evidently Mr. Arnold Davis was in the car with John Norman Collins and some individual who he can't remember, depending on what you read.
And there, if you can see as we're sharing, there is John Norman Collins and Arnie Davis, the Ski Club, 1967.
Right. And so the conflict is that supposedly they took Michelle to that rooming house so that John Norman Collins could get his 1956 DeSoto. Mm-hmm. And he was going to drive her to Ann Arbor where she was going to meet with her boyfriend or her fiance. And in the Catching Serial Killers book, it says that they went to a Kmart parking lot and John Norman Collins, this is Arnie Davis talking to Earl James, probably in August of 1969 after Collins is arrested for the Karen Sue Bynum murder, which was the last one that he was convicted of. And he said he sat in the car and John Norman Collins and the other person unnamed, and he couldn't remember, raped Miss Shell.
Yeah, let me stop you right there, because I think this is where we get into this when people start discussing things like, we have this one serial killer. We know 3 people picked her up. We know, I think, from the Terra in Ypsilanti, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is she knows something's wrong because they immediately go up the road and take a wrong turn. Okay, so the witness knows that. And there's 3 people. There's a lot of information going on here. So from day one, square one, the beginning of it all, they are aware that 3 people are involved. The police are not ignorant of this knowledge. Am I correct on that?
That is correct, because also there were 3 youths wandering around that Kennedy Fieldhouse, or whatever it's called, around 10 o'clock, 10:30, and they were using the phone, and a janitor broomed them. And one of them was an individual with a green, I think it was a green EMU t-shirt on.
Right.
And they fit the same description. So that puts the people in, those 3 guys in the field house right about the time when Miss Shell is picked up.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about Arnie Davis now, and we're talking about John Norman Collins.
Mm-hmm.
This is a murder investigation, and I think everybody who's watched this knows that. And somehow they managed not to be able to identify the 3rd person, and it appears that everybody was okay with that because they never identified.
No, they didn't. And more interesting, they never tied the car to. So supposedly a brother or a cousin of Arnie Davis had a vehicle this same color.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I beat up Earl James about his book, because, and I don't know whether he did that because of people really touchy about putting real names in there. Sometimes he used fake names, sometimes he used real names. And I don't know what his decision-making process was. And I've said it before, it probably was not edited by anybody, or anybody who would have properly made these things to where they make sense. But these allegations are in that book, and he footnotes them, interestingly, to different reports and different interviews that he did while he was a Michigan State Police. I don't know what he was at the time. He retired as a lieutenant, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that if you go here, and there will be a link down here about chronology, and they're talking about the fact that Arnie's lack of telling people probably cost 5 other people their lives, because they're involved in this. This is no clean sheet. And again, you're watching this. And we'll get into Manuel later. You see him here, but this is a very, very interesting thing. And this blog is actually very well done, and we want to give credit to Gregory there for it. But it's one of those things. Give him full credit on it. There's times where I think his blog is actually a little bit more informative than his book, though I enjoyed his book. But right. I think that that's really kind of where we're at, and we will get to Manuel later, which is the 3rd person that actually kind of runs this triangle, but nobody can remember who he is.
Yeah, evidently.
So we got that. It's a week before they find her.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's my opinion that in this course, this is when I think this investigation starts going horribly wrong. Okay. Yep. I think if you listen to our first episodes, and we kind of give you this buildup about what was going on in the 60s, when you start talking about some of the other things that are occurring, then you can see where there could be some problems. And we went over the last 2 with the first victim. But now we're getting to the part where you're starting to see just mistakes made, or just information totally disregarded.
Yeah. This one.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say this one. So the first victim, if you remember, was found at a farmhouse. So this is the victim map of the placements from the Detroit Free Press from July 28th of 69. And it shows all of the victims and the placement of them.
Right.
And Joan Elsbeth Shell, she is found on Glacier Way, pretty close to Earhart Road, about 150 yards from it, in a new development. And if you go look at it on a Google map, you'll see it's a medium to high end or upper middle class neighborhood that was being built evidently in the late 60s. But it is just in Ann Arbor's jurisdiction, the city of Ann Arbor. So, and that becomes important because, as we said in the last one, John Norman Collins was a police buff, and he was hanging out at this bomber's restaurant where all of the local law enforcement ate and exchanged ideas. And his uncle, Officer, or like, he was a corporal at the time, was in a command position in the Michigan State Police. And this is going to come into play a little later when he becomes an actual suspect. But I just wanted to state that where they found Miss Shell was in a construction site, and it was found relatively quickly after the body was dumped there, because they were working on roofs and stuff, and it was close enough to where the construction teams would have seen or smelled the body. And the body had been gone for 5 days. In the actual site where she was found, there was no blood, and it appeared that the lower part of the body was somehow preserved, either in a stream or in a cellar or something like that.
Yeah. So, we also know, if I'm not mistaken, she was sexually assaulted.
Yes, actually, there was semen found, and I believe later tested, and we'll do this in our postscript. But I believe that the Michigan State Police tested it in the early 2000s, and it came back to John Norman Collins.
Okay, yeah, we'll handle that on the other one. But so we do know we have the sexual assault. What we don't have is an actually clean line of what happened.
Yeah.
We have 3 people involved. We know that. We have witnesses that saw her get in the car. She willfully got in the car. We know that I believe there was a custodian staff that saw 3 guys walking around the field house.
Yep.
I do think that people placed her and John Norman Collins together.
Yes.
That was there. She never makes it to Ann Arbor to see her boyfriend, and we know that. We know she was sexually assaulted. What we really don't know, and again, we're not trying to just bash for bash sake, but we're just being blunt. What we really don't know is what happened to her.
Yeah.
Here's what we're actually led to believe. And if there's any part of this story that you want to add to, correct, or modify, do it.
Mm-hmm.
We got 3 people picking up this person. We then know that they were sexually assaulted and murdered. And we're now supposed to believe that 2 people, one of them that nobody can, identify, has nothing to do with this murder. I mean, at the minimal, they're witnesses. Yeah. Okay, that's the minimal. Mm-hmm. More than likely they participated in one way or the other. Okay. And that just seemed, and I know this is going to sound amazing to people because I think they're going to want us to give them a lot of who, what, when, and where. But honestly, I think that just fell off the map of the investigation, unless there's something I do not remember.
Well, there in James's book, he goes through 3 different things that could have possibly happened.
Yes.
Okay.
But none of this was proved, but
none of it's proven. And he says that too. He says, look, any of this could have happened. All right.
Go ahead.
So the 3 people pick her up and take her to wherever. Mm-hmm. They all do what they do, and they all participate, and they kill her. Mm-hmm. and rape her. And then where the body stays for 4 days, they don't know.
Right.
The autopsy revealed that she died, or at least her process of digestion stopped within 30 minutes. They think it was at midnight. So something happened within 30 minutes of 11:30 to midnight that scared her to the point where her digestion stopped. Okay. Right. They have that John Norman Collins was with her at 11:23 or 11:30. All right. So the first scenario is all 3 of them are involved. All 3 of them do it. The second scenario is they drive a block over to 619 Emmett Street, where John Norman Collins and Arnie Davis are living. They get out. John Norman Collins gets her into his DeSoto, and he drives her off and does what he does. And she's found at Glacier Way and Earhart Drive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The third scenario is, and this is what is the bizarre one, because I don't know why he was never prosecuted. They actually granted Arnie Davis immunity for his testimony in the Karen Sue Beineman case. And they went out, and we won't get to Manuel yet, but they went out and basically said he was a stellar person for the prosecution during that Karen Sue Beineman thing. And he was caught with John Norman Collins going to the California murder in this stolen camper. And he is balls deep in all of this.
Yes. And let me clarify something to people that are listening, because we don't want to get ahead on Manuel. Okay. We know Manuel is also in the presence of John Norman Collins when he kills somebody in California. And we believe, and we have talked about it in other episodes, that there might have been more. Okay. Yeah. And I can tell you, in the stuff that I've seen, it appears the investigators were a lot more worried about bad checks and a stolen trailer.
They seem to be. Well, that's easier to prove, but evidently.
I think there's a part where I want everybody that's listening to just focus on this, because this does not get better as we go along.
Yeah, it gets worse. So
when we go back to Gary Leiterman and we show you the totality of it, this is why there's genuine concerns. We're not sitting here going, I'm just going to pick up. We just think this guy's innocent because Robert worked with him for a while and he seemed like a nice guy. Mm-hmm. Okay, but we're not there. We don't function like that. We have a lot of experience. We don't function on how we feel about. We think he's a nice guy.
No,
okay? I'm sure Gary was, but that's not how we function. And you're going to see this reoccurring theme of people not asking the right questions, nobody questioning anybody. Look, in a regular investigation, and even in 1968, mm-hmm. Okay, you don't try to make a deal with Arnie, you charge Arnie.
Right.
Arnie's not in any position to wield anything. Okay, let me tell you who is in zero position to negotiate with you. Arnie.
Yeah.
Arnie's last seen in a car with somebody who you're pretty sure murdered him, and you have no belief system that Arnie didn't murder him.
Right.
If you really want to go here and go, well, you can't prove he did that, Joe. Well, you're right. You know why? Because they didn't investigate.
Yeah.
But you know what? To be proven that you participated in a murder, you didn't actually have to kill the person. Like perhaps you were in the car before and then you didn't let him get out.
Right.
Or afterwards you helped somebody do something. Okay? There's a lot. Arnie Davis is in no position that anybody should have been dealing with him as he had information. Okay? And this is where, when you start watching this, you begin to see, it sounds horrible, but you just start seeing things where I couldn't even give you an answer.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have 50 some years of hindsight, but in 68, this is what they knew. John Norman Collins lived right next door to this woman. Supposedly, he was going to go on a date with her. I don't know whether that was true or not. Mm-hmm. He denied even knowing her.
Right.
He denied it to his aunt. Mm-hmm. He denied it to several people. Mm-hmm. But the people who were the eyewitness of him with her knew them both. Yeah. And eyewitnessed him. They mucked up the time frame because they didn't want to get him in trouble. Yeah. But for sure, that put him in her presence 30 minutes before her death. I think that would be highly suspect. But, but this is where there's several things going on in the background, which are kind of starting to come into focus. One is this frickin' fraternity is threaded throughout this. Okay. Arnie Davis was in that fraternity. So was allegedly the witness that saw John Norman Collins and the victim together at 11:30. So probably were the other brothers that were, or fraternity brothers that were in this red car, whoever the hell they were, right?
And actually, there's a link, and there'll be a link here that Collins just basically says we were fraternity brothers, and you're supposed to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
I know I keep my mouth shut. I mean, that's basically what he said. There's going to be a link down there, and that was in another episode, and I don't want to revisit the same thing over and over again, but there'll be a link there. He basically said, we're frat brothers. I have information on them, and I didn't tell. I kept my end of the bargain.
True. And so then the other issue is, other than the three youths that were wandering around the field house without permission, that they thought somebody had to have a key to get in. John Norman Collins worked at that field house. Another coincidence, winky, right?
Yeah.
And then also, both the first two victims worked at the field house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, John Norman Collins, that came to the interest of the police because he was saying how bad Joan Schell's body was torn up in the murder. Okay, and we hadn't talked about that, but Miss Schell was stabbed 3 times in the back and then 20 times in the front. She was stabbed in her skull, which they think killed her, and her carotid artery was cut on her neck. Okay. She was brutalized, and this was another frenzied killing like the first, which is going to come into play in the third one, or at least why they thought it was different. Mm-hmm. But so we have it stacking up against, at least as to John Norman Collins, why he should have been a prime suspect. And then, Joe, do you remember why they turned their back on John Norman Collins and cleared him of this being a suspect?
I know that my personal belief is his uncle is what I think.
That's exactly what happened. If you
the state police, I want you to go over, not in total details, but how brutalized she was. Go over that for a second again, Paul.
Well, they think the 3 stab wounds in the back was through her clothing. Therefore, she had tried to run, and she was stabbed. And they think with a 4-inch knife, which comes into play because John Norman Collins happened to have a 4-inch knife at the time that Arnie Davis was told to hold. Mm-hmm. Another mystery of mysteries of why this guy is an accessory after, before, or during the fact that they're freaking all these murders that are occurring.
Right.
And then she was stabbed in the skull, which they think I think the autopsy revealed that was the mortal wound. But she was also, her neck was, her carotid artery was also cut. And then, and this will come into play in a couple of different murders, her clothing was up around her neck as if she was trying to be strangled.
And if I'm not mistaken, and again, clarify it because I think you're the person that was closest to this as far as doing it. He told somebody in pretty graphic detail what happened.
Yeah, that's what he told somebody at the field house, a coworker,
a female,
and that coworker reported it. But not only reported it, she was so distraught over it that they had given her some drugs to calm her down after whatever graphic detail he had said. It had mentally messed her up enough to where she had to go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, whoever the hell.
Right. Now, here's an ironic thing. Today, I was watching another video, and there won't be a link in here, but I was watching another video where they were actually discussing the Kennedy assassination. We don't want to get lost on that. But they were talking about things people had said. And this attorney said, the worst thing that every attorney nightmare is that your client will say something that, like if you're in a murder case, that your client will share information with the police or at court that only the murderer would know. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's your worst nightmare. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm pretty sure John Collins did that.
Well, and here's how he got out of it. They said, well, they went and they interviewed him because of this. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, my uncle told me, remember the Michigan corporal?
Yeah.
He told me that. Well, they interviewed him and he went, no, I didn't tell him anything. Maybe it's the Bomber restaurant that told
the Bomber restaurant. I'm going to tell you something. And this is something that I want to say, and there's police officers that be listening to this, that some of them will agree with me. And a couple will not because they're wrong. Okay. Just because you work at the police department don't mean you know any. Okay. I work at the police department. I didn't know about every crime that happened. I didn't know about every murder that happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And the information you got a lot of times at the beginning of a crime, and this is important, isn't always correct. Work the murder scene, Columbus. Got the whole story. Media comes up and they go, Chief, man, can you tell me what happened? I said, no. I said, we haven't investigated anything. And they had kind of heard the story because it was already out on the street, right? And they go, what about this? And I confirmed or denied nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that entire story was make believe.
Hmm.
It was completely a lie. In other words, the guy who should have been our number one witness, well, his biggest problem is he's a liar, right? Mm-hmm. And told us crazy nothingness. He managed to tell people on the street. He told the news people. And we're all just sitting there thinking we have all this big, gigantic ball of information, and we had a ball of nothing. Mm-hmm. That happens so much that you should just assume that the first story you hear is probably incorrect. Okay? Yeah. So even if he said, my uncle told me, I was at the Bomber restaurant, I heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody. Actually, that's not the way this works. If you have information that only the murderer would know, that he should have been, this has caused 5 other people, minimum, maybe as many as 30 other people to die.
Yeah.
Because nobody did their job.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And there is, and this is not putting authors down because I've written, and you can't write a book and cover every single area. So I'm not putting anybody down. Okay. But there's a lot of times when I read stuff and they'll go, well, he told, whoa. What do you mean he told? The murder suspect. Let me tell you what would be news. If he said, hey, I did it. Let me tell you what I did. That's news. Him being a liar is expected. Yeah. Now I'll tell a lawyer joke and you'll understand it. You'll be watching the news and they'll go, so-and-so has been charged. His lawyer made a statement that they didn't do it. I'm like, I'll tell you what, I would just left that out. Because what would have been news if the attorney said, holy cow, he's a murderer. Right. That would have been news. It'd have been a rotten attorney, but it would have been news. Right. And I think that there is a lot of times that people blow over, he said, he's a murder suspect.
This is where I'm going to beat up the investigation a little bit, and you can chime in and you tell me.
Beat it up a lot at this point.
Right. So this person who works at the field house, John Norman Collins, is telling in graphic detail what had happened to Joan Schell. Wouldn't somebody interview that person who heard John Norman Collins say something and write down verbatim what was said, and then compare that to the actual scene of the murder and what was really known? I don't think that the stabbing in the skull was known. I don't think the 3 in the back was known. I don't think the 20 in the front was known. I don't think that the carotid artery was known. And then the rape, I can't imagine that was on the front page of the news right out of the box.
No. And I'll tell you the other thing too, and this is going to be more speculative. It is not unusual for people to claim they kill people when they didn't. I know that sounds goofy, but it's just a fact. Okay. Yeah. But for you to give me a graphic description of that, okay, that should have just never went away. Okay. Mm-hmm. Should have just never went away. He should have been grilled. He should have been suspect number 1. He should have been being watched. He should have been being all of those things. And we're not beating anybody up, because beating up people is just pulling things out of the air. We're being factual. They just did not do their job and other people died.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? It's that simple. And I think that, as we wind up today's episode, I think for our listeners, whether you're listening to this podcast or that podcast, or you're listening to us, there isn't a matter of picking sides on this. You either did your job or you didn't do your job. Okay? You either did follow through or you didn't do follow through. And right now, I think starting with the fact that you didn't focus on 3 people in that car, which should have been number 1, Goes
Yeah.
back to many things we talked about on whether or not he did it by himself, right?
Mhm.
Or getting lost into the fact that he tells somebody stuff in detail. There just had to have been way more aggression on that. And I also going to say this, and I think this is a good note to end this on. And when we're back next week, we'll have an amendment and kind of go over a few more things on this. His uncle should have been completely, totally removed from not only this investigation, but it would have been practical and respectful for him to be moved to another precinct.
Right.
Okay, let me explain something. Let me go ahead and put on my bureaucratic hat. Okay, this has nothing to do with super investigations. This is me spending a lot of time being a bureaucrat. Get a little bureaucrat hat on. Okay.
Mhm.
The second he became a suspect, his uncle needed to be working, I don't know, probably somewhere on the other side of the state.
Yeah.
And, and you would go, well, that doesn't seem fair that he would, look, man, fair. I don't know, get with me later. He should have been on the other side of the state. The amazing part of this from a bureaucratic / investigative thing is that his uncle stays exactly where he's at. There would have been other places, and I know we can get lost in space and time, that you'd have had people trying to fire his uncle. Not save him, not give him a promotion. They'd have been trying to fire him. I'll tell you right now, there's police departments even in 60s when his nephew goes, I knew about the murder because he told me. He'd have been done. Let me explain something to you. He'd have been done.
Yeah.
He'd have been working at Shoney's.
Yeah.
And then when he said, I didn't tell him, that's the equivalent of the murderer saying, I didn't murder him.
Right.
I would work on this phrase. Would you like fries with that? He would have been gone.
Right.
If they liked him, he would have been on the other side of the state. Where would have been the furthest place he could have stayed in Michigan and been there?
The UP.
Yeah, that's where he would have been. Okay. I don't know what he would have been doing up there. Maybe he'd have been looking for people illegally fishing. I don't know, but he wouldn't have been in that area. He'd have been gone. There is amazing things like that where you just watch the police department do nothing.
Yeah.
And don't get into the, do not get into the, well, it's 1967, Joe, 68, Joe. Listen, he had less protective rights in 1968 than you do in 2021. Yeah. I am pretty sure that state police could have walked in there and said to him, ooh, you're going to the Upper Peninsula. Might want a jacket.
Right.
And if he told him he had a house, he says, you still got a house. You just don't live there anymore.
You're right.
Because you're going to be gone. It's amazing. And I will tell you this, in a lot of other places, the second his nephew said that he'd been fired.
Well, and just to tee up, and this is going kind of way in the future, but the seventh victim was killed in that uncle's basement. Okay. That's one thing. Secondarily, he was storing stolen motorcycles in this state policeman's garage. Okay. John Norman Collins was an epic thief, and so was all the people most of the people, legal,
I'm going to paraphrase you, Rob. He was running a criminal enterprise out of his police uncle's house.
Yep.
And you know what? He still got promoted.
He did.
Yes. We're not bashing anybody on these facts. I mean, seriously, should have been fired, or he should have been so far away he couldn't have even seen straight.
And, John Norman Collins looked clean cut. Yeah. He was doing okay in school. Evidently, everybody's turning a blind eye to the thievery, except for evidently his fraternity kicked him out of the fraternity for stealing stuff from them. And the motorcycle that he gets caught on is one of the fraternity brothers for the final murder.
I'm going to share this because I do think that sometimes when you don't look, and everybody can figure that out, when you don't look like people think you should look when you murder people, perhaps like if you look like these two guys, I do think people make excuses for you. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think if you looked at those two people and I showed you that picture, you go, oh, there's a couple of frat guys from the 60s. They look like they were good fellas.
So they used an identikit to come up with a potential suspect.
This was the
picture.
drawing, right?
Yeah. You will see that the hair is very distinctive on it, and it is exactly what you see in that picture there and every other picture.
Well, get that to me and I'll get a clearer version up here on it. Well, look, guys, this is a interesting case. This is not a cut and dry, John Norman Collins did it. There's a lot of other shady stuff going on. So we're going to get with you and add it there. Send me that picture. I'll get it up there for everybody. Okay. So listen, we will see everybody next week. We'll go over this case a little bit more and kind of try to really drive home, if we haven't already, this episode. This is where I think the Michigan murders, this case right here, is where I think the Michigan murders come unglued.
Yeah.
This is right at the beginning where they come unglued. So until next time, we hope to see y'all guys. Y'all have a great day and
hit the bottom, like, subscribe, and comment on it, please. And see ya.
And if you have any questions, let us know, and we'll see you next week.